Hello, this is Mark from Enchantment of Eternity. A few months back, I recorded a revisited video for the City on the Edge of Forever. Now, if you haven't been following my channel, I've been covering every single episode of Star Trek The Original Series. I just finished doing that. However, I have reviewed various episodes of Star Trek throughout the 7 years, I guess, my channel's been going. And I'm just now starting to go back and do them all in order. So there are various episodes that I already reviewed. So rather than redo my review, I leave that original review up there and add it to the playlist. But I do a revisited video for my Patreon supporters where I go on Patreon and upload a video of me revisiting the episode I already reviewed, maybe giving some updated feelings on it, or critiquing the review I did originally, or maybe correcting some things that I did. So I have a series of videos like this on Patreon for all those who support me on Patreon on any level. And so I did one for every original series episode I had already reviewed before I started going in order. And so this is one such episode, the one I did for City on the Edge of Forever. And since I just finished covering the original series, I thought I'd release this publicly for everyone to see on my channel. So you can get sort of a taste and idea of what I've been releasing on Patreon. And also, I particularly chose City on the Edge of Forever because I wasn't that happy with my original review for it, which I made almost like a 6 or 7 years ago. I don't know. I will say in this video. But yeah, I wasn't that happy with it. It was only like a 10-minute video, and this is my favorite episode of the original series, so I thought it deserved a more in-depth discussion, which is what I do in this video. So please enjoy this video that I recorded a few months ago, City on the Edge of Forever Revisited. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Revisited for the City on the Edge of Forever. I had originally recorded my review for the City on the Edge of Forever on March 9th, 2015. So by far making this the oldest video I have revisited as of yet. This was, I believe, I began my channel in 2014. So this was like within a year of me first starting the channel, and I still have that really as my intro card. Was this really piece of crap thing I threw together on MS Paint, and eventually I had someone watching. It's like, I like your videos, but that intro card is terrible, which is true. But the other thing that's even more important about this, well, also the fact that I use actual music, Star Trek music from the show, and a song. And I have clips, as I mentioned before, and I'm amazed this didn't get a copyright thing. I don't know how this one didn't, and some of these other videos did. Blows my mind. But anyway, the one thing that's stuck in my mind about this review is I don't recall doing a good job. I have a memory of doing a very piss poor job with this particular review, and it's only 9 minutes long. I know some people might like that, but nowadays, most of my reviews range from 20 to 40 minutes, sometimes even 60 minutes long, and I fully dissect the episode and get into it. And an episode like this, which is easily one of my favorite of the entire Star Trek franchise, I think I deserve to do a little bit more than 9 minutes. I think at the time I was trying to make my videos shorter and more succinct because they got more views, but views, I'm long past caring about that. Yes, and not only is it just 9 minutes, but the explanation, the synopsis I gave of the episode super long, and it has clips, and so I actually don't talk about the episode, in my opinion, my review of it that much, for especially comparative to my newer videos. And the other thing is that I do remember distinctly about when I recorded this video, because at the time, this is when I was taking requests for Star Trek episodes to review, and whenever someone requests an episode, no questions asked, I do it. I go record a review for it. And I just remember, for whatever reason, I really was not in the mood to review this episode at the time. I had no inclination. I felt it was more of a chore, and I was doing it kind of out of obligation. I don't know why that was. Maybe I was just burnt out on the original series at the time, or had no interest in sort of touching it. And even though I watch this episode now, and it brings me, like, it moves me emotionally, it brings me to tears, and I think it's one of my best, one of the best most classic sci-fi stories ever of anything. And for some reason, when I watched this episode at this time, maybe I was just too stressed in my life. I had too many other things I was worried about. I wasn't that concerned with it, and I was kind of just reciting the paces like, oh, this is a good time travel. Oh, what a tragic time travel story, without like actually feeling the review, if you know what I mean. In fact, and when I look back on all the reviews I've ever done on my channel, this is one of the ones I think I've fumbled the most, because not only was my heart not really into it, but it is one of my, it's one of the best science fiction episodes of all time, and I think it deserved more than what I gave it. But, maybe I'm being too harsh on myself, because I just went back and watched the review, and it wasn't that bad. It's just, I just remember at the time, like, not really feeling it at all. But yeah, I definitely could have went into a lot more detail. So let me do that now. First of all, and this, I don't believe this is something I was fully aware of when I first recorded this review. Now, almost 8 years ago. Wow. Anyway, Harlan Ellison, who is the credited script writer of this episode, his original draft, I didn't actually read it, although it is out there. He published it in book form, and it's on the internet, so people can read the full original script for City on the Edge of Forever. But I have heard it summarized before, and basically didn't have, I think most things are the same, but it didn't have McCoy in it getting, accidentally dosing himself with the funny juice and going insane and changing the timeline. It had a character who, of course, name I can't remember, who was dealing drugs on the Enterprise and got found out and was going to be arrested, so he escaped through the Guardian of Forever and altered the timeline, and then Kirk and Spock traveled back in time and eventually had to track him down and hunt him down and stop him. To be honest, it's been a while since I heard this summarized. I guess I should have done research for it. I guess I'm being lazy again. I can't remember the whole thing with Edith Keeler was there, but I'm pretty sure it was, and it was mostly the same. But the difference is that Kirk Spock captured this, drug dealer in question, brought him back to the Enterprise, and executed him. Now, I saw a video from Steve Shives when he broke down this original version and gave his opinion that the original script was, in fact, better than what they revised it to for television. And I really raised my eyebrow on that, because, and again, you got to take this, my opinion, for what it is, because as I said, I have not read the script. I was about to say I've yet to read it, but I don't think I ever will. I have not read the script, but based off of the summary, like, are you fucking nuts? Like, that this is not a Star Trek episode. Now, before I get into reasons why, which I don't even feel like I need to, because I think it should be apparent to anyone as a Star Trek fan why that idea is dumb and doesn't fit with Star Trek. But before I get into that, I want to recite this other story that I heard, and this time it was from Lore Runner, about this awards. Now, both script versions actually for this episode had awards. I believe the revised version that aired got a Hugo Award, but the original version, Harlan Ellison's version, got a Writers Guild Award. Now, and I've heard recount the story where Gene Roddenberry, what's his face, Kuhn, whatever his name is, the producer of Star Trek at the time, and basically showrunner, although they didn't have that title back in the 60s, but essentially he was, and a few other people from Star Trek were there to cheer him on and to congratulate him for his award. And he went up there and blasted them. For his award speech, he was like, "This is a lesson. Don't let them rewrite you." And he pointed directly at the people who had came here to celebrate him. Don't let them rewrite you. So, also I've been did a tad bit of research on Mr. Ellison and found out that he is very historically a crank. He's always in a bad mood, and someone who worked closely with him described him as he's the only creature he knows in existence whose natural habitat is hot water. So he's a bit of a curmudgeon, and I've looked up some of the lawsuits that he has. He has so many lawsuits of him accusing people of plagiarizing his work. And most of them, I think they say settled out of court, but it sounds like he didn't get much. And in some cases, he wasn't actually asking for much. Some cases, he only wanted like there was a Marvel comic apparently that for wholesale took his story, and actually they did it, and they admit it, and they apologized, and he could have sued them for millions of dollars, but all he wanted was the same pay that the comic book writer got paid, and a lifetime subscription to anything Marvel published, which I guess he's a comic book fan. So he is, reasonable, I guess, in that regard. But one of the lawsuits I found most interesting was that he sued James Cameron for ripping off his idea for Terminator, or James Cameron, did Terminator, and apparently he claims it was stolen wholesale from a script an episode that he wrote for The Outer Limits called Soldier. I still haven't seen this. I'm actually curious to see it now. Betcha it's nothing like Terminator, but he accused James Cameron of ripping it off, and James Cameron, they settled out of court, obviously, because it was this studio or whatever, but James Cameron had been on the record saying that is complete and utter, well, he didn't use his words, I'm paraphrasing here, bullshit, that he absolutely 100% had nothing, that episode of Outer Limits had nothing to do with his idea for Terminator, and I believe him. I honestly do, especially recounting. That story of the awards ceremony, only a total freaking douchebag asshole could do that. Now, there has been cases of studio interference destroying projects and interfering with the artistic vision of the creators. Absolutely. It's just way too many cases of that in Hollywood. It's really, really commonplace. But not every time the studio makes changes to a script, is that the case? I remember watching Mothman Prophecies, the behind the scenes on it, and how much the director slash writer had to fight the studio for his work, and I liked his work. I liked his finished product. And the biggest example I think is Alien 3, where they gave God, what's that guy's name? Really great director who's going on to do Seven, Fight Club, and Zodiac. God, why is his name escaping me at the time? But you know the dude, the good director. He directed Alien 3, and the studio gave him no creative control whatsoever. It was completely run by committee movie, which is why that movie sucks. It had nothing to do with God, fuck, why can't I think of that director's name? It had nothing to do. Alright, I'm gonna have to pause this and figure this out. Sorry. It's gonna be eating me. David Fincher. God damn it, David Fincher. Okay, it had nothing to do with David Fincher why that movie sucked. The directing aspect of it is actually decent. It's the script that's terrible, and the creative decisions, which apparently he was completely locked out of, because that was the first movie he directed. He was seen as a rookie, and he had only done music videos before then, so they felt like they just hired him as a hired gun so they could push him around and tell him what to do. And thus, you get a fucking movie that kills off two of the main characters from one of the best movies ever made before the credits even fucking roll. Like, that is the biggest crime in all of history. But anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent. But anyway, David Fincher actually went on to do amazing films. Fight Club, Seven, The Social Network. He became a legendary director. And so had the studio maybe given him some fucking creative input and actually let him have say over the movie, perhaps it actually maybe wouldn't have sucked. But anyway, so yes, there are examples of studios completely destroying projects by strangling the creative control of its auteur or creators. However, there are other examples where the creators maybe aren't as good as they think they are, and what is required is more of a communal effort and everyone pulling together to make a great film. For me, the biggest example of this is Donnie Darko. The director of that, I'm again blanking on his name, is decent because he's the one who came up with the idea for Donnie Darko. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, and I think he did a good job directing it. But had he been giving full 100% control of it, it wouldn't have been as good. And this is a provable fact because the director's cut sucks. It's my humble opinion. And the changes that the producers, it was a small studio that Drew Barrymore and several others were in charge of, the changes that they made actually made the movie better. It's the fact that it was more of a group effort, and there were so many creative minds, such as costume department, set design, and the producers who were controlling the script and the edit, is what made it such a masterpiece. So it's not all, and then there's I talked about this in Star Trek Enterprise, where the studio's changes to Brennan Braga and Rick Berman's piece of crap actually made it marginally better. Of course, didn't actually get better until they actually kicked Rick Berman and Brennan Braga off of that show because they are hacks as showrunners and anyway and destroyed Voyager. But sorry, I mean, Brennan Braga is a good writer, don't get me wrong. He's wrote some of my favorite episodes, but he has no business being a showrunner for a Star Trek show. That's proven by the end of Voyager and the start of Enterprise. But sorry, I'm off on the tangent again. Point is, it's not always the case that the studio is in the wrong, and for me, this is a clear example of that. This is another clear example because I really think that the finished script, the finished product, the finished episode of City on the Edge of Forever is much better than that original script. Now, again, grain of salt. I didn't actually read the script, but again, I've had heard detailed descriptions and summations of it, so I feel like I know enough to know that, first of all, having a drug dealer on the Enterprise, no, that doesn't fit. Here's the thing, and this is something this guy who's clearly an idiot or a curmudgeon or just too grumpy to understand this, because he's worked in television, he should fucking know that being rewritten is par for the course. It's a normal thing in television. Vast majority of these scripts, and this is something I've learned through studying all the scripts in Star Trek, have been completely changed and altered from its original version, which is what you have to do, particularly in a TV show, even more so than a movie, because it has to fit in with an over arc of characters and episodes, and they all have to have some cohesion. So yes, there will be showrunners, producers whose job it is to oversee this and make sure everything runs smoothly. And to be frank, the reason why the Star Wars sequel trilogy sucks is because there wasn't a producer there to oversee. I mean, there was Kathleen Kennedy, but she obviously did not do that strict of a job. There was no driving creative force making sure that all three movies in the trilogy had a cohesion and worked together and portrayed the same characters and told the same story. Instead, they hired three separate directors to do whatever the fuck they want, and the third director even did such a terrible job they fired him and got the first director back. And so that's why that sequel trilogy is a total mess. And it's especially true of TV shows, that you need to have someone over, and that's why it's very commonplace for spec scripts or scripts written by people not on the writing staff to be completely and totally rewritten to the fact where it's almost a totally different episode. That's a very common thing. So many Deep Space Nine Next Generation stories. Like, alright, let me give you an example of Deep Space Nine. In the Pale Moon Light, the original idea for this was Jake investigating Prime Minister Shakar on Bajor. It's nothing like the finished product, and the finished product is one of the best episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise. So, so this guy is obviously in the wrong and a douchebag, as I mentioned. I will give him credit for being a good writer. I mean, he came up with the idea of City on the Edge of Forever and the bare bones of it, so I definitely give him credit there, but he's definitely a douchebag to say that in his speech, because I 100% agree with the changes that Roddenberry and the producers of Star Trek made, because you can't have a fucking drug dealer on the Enterprise, and more than that, Kirk and Spock bring him back to the Enterprise and execute him? They execute him? It's bad enough that they had the death penalty thing in the menagerie for visiting Talos for it. I've railed against that, and that was kind of just contrived writing in order to create stakes, which, it was bad writing, and I'll call it out for that. But in this 23rd century, utopia future, which has been established as a utopia future, even this early in the show, because this is late in season 1, you can't have an episode where the heroes execute an officer on their ship for selling drugs. Fucking no. Just no. This sounds like one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. Now, again, not saying the entirety of the original script was shit, because from it came one of the best episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise, but it only became that way because of Gene Roddenberry and the producers knowing that they needed to change what they needed to change, and they needed to change in order to make it fit. Now, I've heard the opinion that it would have made more sense to have this drug dealer character rather than McCoy just high on smack and going around acting insane. But I disagree very strongly because I feel like it detracts from the main story. McCoy is basically just a MacGuffin. And that's why I think it works so much better just having McCoy on Smack running around crazy, because he's not the point of the episode. The point of the episode is Kirk and his love with Edith Keeler and his having to let her die in order to restore this timeline. They create the stakes. By the timeline has been altered, the Enterprise is gone, Earth has been completely changed, they're all fucked, and this is their only chance to save the entirety of all human existence. And that's the stakes. And then when we go back and we follow Kirk as he falls in love with Edith Keeler, and then we find out the only way he can accomplish this is by letting the love of his life be killed, and that will restore the timeline. McCoy, you notice how I didn't even mention McCoy in that summary, and I don't have to, because McCoy is simply the catalyst. He's what triggers the change in the timeline, and that's about it. And I love how they don't make it about how he needs to be stopped. Well, except for he needs to be stopped from saving Edith Keeler's life. So it's not really about McCoy. And so had you created this whole character who was this drug-dealing asshole and it was all about hunting him down, that would have distracted. That would have been a total distraction of what this episode actually is about. And so, yeah, I gotta humbly, very strongly, extremely strongly, to the extreme, disagree with Mr. Shives and anyone else who thinks that this script was better than what they did. I think this is a clear example of producers who know their show, changing a good idea, but adjusting it to fit the show and to make sense in the show and to be consistent with the characters and the tone of the show, which is what any good fucking TV producer should do. Their fucking job, and they did it well. And I think this guy is an asshole douchebag who's completely in the wrong for calling out his friends and colleagues that were there to support him, for making changes that were totally fucking necessary to make. And so that's what I have to say about that. Now, nitpick time. I did have a nitpick about this episode when I was watching it. And to be fair, this is a common nitpick I have with the original series. It's one of the worst examples of it, though. So after McCoy juices up and starts acting insane and goes to the transporter room to beat him down, there's, I think it's Kyle, actually. Good old Kyle. He appears more in the second season. But anyway, he's at the transporter and with his back turned, and McCoy goes behind him and goes, boo, like karate chops him in the back, like his lower back. And they play this really, they went overboard with the trumpets. I know that it's common to do, when someone gets knocked out, to do a Donna! They do that a lot when Spock does the nerve pinch. But they had the trumpet players, they added a couple extra trumpet players and gave them some cocaine or something, because it was a way over the top. It was like, Donna! And McCoy karate chops Kyle to the back, and he gets knocked unconscious. Nobody gets knocked unconscious from being karate chopped to the lower back. I'm sorry. And especially not by a doctor with no fighting or military training or combat training whatsoever. Nobody is going to get knocked unconscious just from getting a slight karate chop to the back. So that scene was actually comical, but don't get me wrong, I still think this is definitely the best episode of the original series, by the way. I was been on record that every time I did a top 10, this was number one. I stick by this. I think when I did a overall franchise top 10, this was in my top 5. I think this is number 5. So this is a masterpiece. Don't get me wrong. No stupid, loud, silly karate chop will change that. But yeah, it's a nitpick I had to throw out there. And of course, there's a lot of convenience in here. Like the concept of the Guardian of Forever is kind of convenient. There just so happens to be a time portal, magical time portal, right there when McCoy goes insane. And well, I guess, coincidences, crazy shit happens, whatever. But it's a very interesting concept that. And I do love how they do that. It really. I talked before about the stakes of the episode. I think this episode does a really good job of really creating these stakes. You feel it when they went to go to call the Enterprise and it's not there, and Kirk looks up and he's paying up into space, and then when we come back from the break, horror's freaking out and she even, it's kind of on the nose dialogue. She says, "I'm scared, Captain," which probably would have been better if you actually act scared rather than saying I'm scared, but we'll forgive again. This is a masterpiece, so we'll forgive that. But because it does such a good job of showing how fucking high the stakes are. That's basically all of existence is at stake here. And the only way that they can fix it is by going back in the portal and trying to stop McCoy wherever he went and whatever he did. So there's a lot of uncertainties involved. And this is the first time, we had the Tomorrow's Yesterday, which in my review I said, for this episode, I said that was a terrible episode, Tomorrow's Yesterday, but I watched that recently. It's not a terrible episode, but it's not that good. It's definitely terrible compared to this one. It doesn't do that good, because it's kind of by the numbers time travel stuff, where here, this is a lot more inventive, a lot more creative with what you can do with time travel, and it does the typical fish out of water stuff with Kirk and Spock having to make up the thing joke about the rice picker or whatever. I thought that was kind of dumb, but whatever. It does show Kirk sort of out of his element. But then we meet Edith Keeler. And the one thing I did mention in my review that the actress, what is her name? I want to say Joanne Collins, but that's probably wrong. It's something like that. Joan Collins, maybe? Anyway, she's amazing. She did an amazing job in this episode. And but more than that, the whole way they portray Edith. Now, again, her dialogue isn't always the best. Sometimes it's a bit clunky, like her little speech about someday. Yeah, Joan Collins, I was right. Man will travel to space or whatever. It could have been better, but the way she portrays it and the way... Actually, again, this is the one full time, so enjoy it, take it in. This is the one time I will totally give Shatner credit and say that he's a good actor. He is a good actor in this one episode alone, and only in this episode. He does a really, really good job in this one episode. All right, and savor it, because it will not come again. I still think he's overall a terrible, terrible actor, but in this episode, I do have to credit him that he actually does a really good job. Yes, they totally sell the romance between them. I think this is smartly acted and smartly written, even though I said the dialogues is at times can be a bit clunky. I still think it was still overall smoothly written, and the chemistry between the two is really, really palpable. It's really done really, really well. Now, I've heard other people talk about how they theorize that Edith Keeler was the one for Kirk. He was his one true love, the woman that if he had to, at the end of his life, had to look back his lovers, and who was it that he felt like was the one woman that he should have spent his entire life with, and who was really the true one. And they speculate that's Edith Keeler. And I don't know if how certain I am about that, but I totally get that. I buy it. I mean, their relationship wasn't very long, so I'm always iffy about people who have a short-lived relationship that may seem like they love each other until they actually get to know each other. But still, you could tell how much madly in love Kirk is. And usually, this show doesn't do a good job of that. Usually, it comes off as lust, as I talked about in previous episodes, like Court Martial and Shore Leave. It comes off as he's just having another fling, where, to be fair, it totally does not come off that. And I don't think there's any future episode, even the one where he gets married and that, what's it called, the Paradise Syndrome? Those characters didn't have any chemistry together. So, yeah, I don't think there's any future episodes either where he has the chemistry that he does with Keeler, and actually you feel the love, that it's real and tangible. And that's what sells the tragedy of this episode so much more. And this is why, like, when you have that scene after, when Spock first tells Kirk that in order to save all of existence, he has to let the love of his life die, and just how Kirk is like in denial and he's fighting this, and Spock has to be firm with him because he knows how Kirk is going to naturally resist this, but it's what they came here to do, is to save everyone, not just themselves, but everyone, and it needs to be done by letting the love of his life die as she was meant to. And I love the scene where she almost fell down the stairs and Kirk catches her and Spock is there and he's like, you realize you gotta let her die, right? Like, she could have died right there. And then Kirk is like, well, no, this isn't the right time because McCoy isn't here. But Spock's like, well, we can't be certain of any of the facts. Which, I gotta agree. I see both their points. Because Kirk is right, because the whole reason why Keeler lives when she was meant to die is because McCoy came in the past to change the timeline. So if McCoy's not there, then it doesn't make any sense that if she was supposed to, no one's there to change the timeline to make her live. But I also see Spock's point of view that maybe McCoy, like, is a butterfly effect situation where McCoy did something earlier that maybe held her up and had talked to her for 5 minutes, so she was in a place where 5 minutes later she wasn't meant to be, and lived where she was meant to die, or something like that. Like, in other words, like what Spock said, that they can't be certain of their facts, and so, Kirk needs to not try to save her in any situation. And I do get that. And that's what, it's a really powerful setup too. It's also the music when Kirk and Edith Keeler are going out on the date is very powerful. It works so well. And yeah, it's just absolutely tragic, and that's what sells it. That's, to me, what makes it a classic, and one of the best classic science fiction stories of all time, time travel stories of all time. The tragedy of Kirk having to hug McCoy to stop him from saving the love of his life, and how devastated he is, and how he cries on his shoulder, and McCoy's just like, what have you done? And Spock's there to be like, what he had to. It's I'm almost gonna cry just talking about it. I think it is a classic. It is one of the best stories in science fiction ever, in my opinion. This rewritten version, by the way. What actually aired on television. And more on that, like when I love the scene, like, and this is why I always loved this episode. I talked about this before, how when I was a teenager, I loved dark shit. I loved shit with really depressing emotional endings, and this is what really, really got to me. So after they came back through the Guardian of Forever, and they're all looking kind of sullen after they went through, but Kirk is, of course, absolutely, completely devastated. And Scotty and Uhura, of course, they haven't experienced any of this. They're just like so happy to see them, happy that the Enterprise, like the timeline's been saved, humanity existence is saved, and so they're ecstatic and over the moon. But Kirk is just like completely, absolutely devastated, and you can tell that. And this is what beautiful, just non-dialogue acting, just face acting. Uhura and Scotty realizing this. You get shots of them and how they have so much sympathy. Even though they don't know what happened, they can just see the other, like, that Kirk is completely destroyed. And the other devastation on his face. And when he picks up that communicator and says, "Let's get the hell out of here." Let's get the hell out of here. It's one of the best line readings that Shatner. I actually might even, no, let me scratch that. It is the best line reading that Shatner has ever given in his entire career. Better than Denny Crane. Him just saying, "Let's get the hell out of here." Because it's, Denny Crane and William Shatner is basically just being William Shatner. But here, he's actually, like, acting. He's actually going outside of his normal, what he would do, and playing a completely devastated, completely destroyed person. And he's not overacting, by the way. He's doing it in a very subtle, which I suspect, I have a large suspicion this had a lot to do with the director. Based on Shatner's other performances, I'm sure the director had to rein him in. But goddamn, what a great line reading, and what a devastating moment. What a truly triumphant masterpiece this was. That ending was, this whole episode, an absolute masterpiece. So, and there's some things you have to take with a grain of salt, like Spock being able to predict the future by using 20th century technology with all these circuits. Like, he can't even do that in the 23rd century, let alone the 20th century. So that's a bit of plot contrivance you have to go with, and I'm willing to go with it because the rest of the episode is so fucking amazing. And yeah, the whole thing with McCoy, like, accidentally shooting himself up with all that thing is also kind of silly. But again, it's not the point of the episode. It's just a device to get where we need to go, and it's not even that bad. So absolutely, totally can forgive it for that. Yeah. So I did talk about the Guardian Forever a lot in my review. Here I'll just compare it because I kept thinking about the Discovery episode in season 3 where it appeared, and how there was this guy named Carl on this faraway planet, and suddenly turned into the Guardian Forever, and they used the same audio from this episode going, "Oh, I am the Guardian of Forever." I talked about that in my Discovery review, that was shameless, like, fan service cash grab, and I fucking hate it. And I actually hate it more the more I think about it. And I remember my sister arguing with me, saying, "Well, they never established that the Guardian Forever wasn't a guy named Carl." Do they have to? No. I'll answer that. No, they do not have to, because that clearly goes against everything that's established in this episode. Yes, you could say, "Oh, well, they never said that wasn't the case," but they don't have to, in my opinion. This still goes against the heart. The intention is obviously that this is a portal that's left behind on this ancient ruined planet. It's not some dude named Carl reading their newspaper who can travel to different planets. That's bullshit. But anyway, that's more of a Discovery criticism. Yeah, I have a lesser opinion of season 3 of Discovery the more I think about it. But anyway, not a lesser opinion of City on the Edge of Forever. A masterpiece. So, My original rating for this episode was a 10 out of 10, and of course, I mean, duh. Obviously, I'm sticking with that. I mean, I'm not going to cop out and do higher than 10 because that's the highest an episode can get. No cop outs here. But yeah, absolutely. It's still a 10. It's still, I think, the best episode of the original series, and one of the best of the entire Star Trek franchise. Top 5 of the entire franchise. Masterpiece. A classic in science fiction general. So, as far as what's coming up next, we have Operation Annihilate, a new video coming out tomorrow, or public on my channel. And then Saturday will be Cat's Paw. God, I can't believe we went from the best episode of the show to 2 terrible episodes in a row. And then on Monday will be Metamorphosis. So, yeah, be sure to keep an eye out for that. And thank you, everyone, for your support. And we'll see you next time.